Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum respected viewers. Very warm welcome to my channel. I am Musaddiq Farooq, Assistant Professor of English in Higher Education Department, the Government of the Punjab. Now today's lecture is 12th one of the series meant for the preparation of English literature and linguistics. And those who want to appear in the test for lectureship can benefit from these lectures if they supplement their reading with these lectures. And as I mentioned at the end of the last lecture, that the next video will be on a discussion about Edmund Spenser. So therefore I have compiled some really useful information on this topic, and if you are following my lectures, I hope you have already subscribed my channel. But if you are new or due to any reason you have not yet subscribed, I request you to do it. Also, do try to watch the lecture till its very end. I assure you that you will not regret the decision of spending your precious time on it, and do not be carried away with the notion that the video contains merely 20 odd questions and nothing else. First, because the questions have much more information than suggested by their number alone, right? And next, the discussion makes the lecture worth giving attention. So keeping all this in view, try to watch the lectures as well as share it with all the concerned fellows and friends. Coming to the subject matter of this lecture, now looking back on the poetry of the 16th century with the historian's perspective, we can see clearly enough that the endeavors and efforts to establish English language as a poetic language, at least the equal of Italian and French, prompted much of the experimentation and exercising that went on for a considerable period. It is true also that among the production of poets between Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, and then Spenser up to Spenser, we do find some accomplished lyrics and an occasional success in longer kinds of verse, but an air of uncertainty still hung over everything, and the poet who could turn out a deft song, a very beautiful song, pleasing song at one moment might very well fall on another occasion. At such a moment, a great poet was the need of the hour, and only Edmund Spenser could be such a figure in history of English literature. He shows to Englishmen the music and beauty of his mother tongue as no one else since the time of Chaucer had ever shown it. No student of English literature can ignore Edmund Spenser and his time and his contribution towards English literature. On this screen, in addition to Edmund Spenser, you can also see vocabulary. There are also some vocabulary items included in this lecture, as I have told you previously that now on the sequence of my lectures will alternate between literature plus vocabulary and linguistics plus grammar, right? And we can also say that even numbered lectures, and this lecture is lecture number 12, even numbered lectures will be on literature plus vocabulary, and odd numbered lectures will be on linguistics and grammar. Let's move on to the questions portion of this lecture. First question, you can see it is not question number 1, rather it is question number 31, and first 30 questions can be found in the lecture number 10. So in order to better prepare the whole age, you are advised to go to that lecture as well after watching this lecture, so that you can put your preparation in some context. Question 1 says, what was the literary form employed by Spenser in his Shepherd's Calendar? One new thing that I have tried in this lecture is that I have highlighted the important pieces of information. If there is more than one piece of information in one question, I have highlighted it, right? What literary form was employed by Shepherd's Calendar? The question can also be moded to include that this and this literary form has been employed by which of the poems written by Edmund Spenser. So on this screen, answers were mistakenly marked first, but now I have removed them. But if you have paid some attention, then you will not have any difficulty. But let's discuss these literary forms. Now, allegorical romance was something that was very common in medieval literature, but it was not as common in the poetry of 16th and 17th century. Epic was also again not as common, and sonnets, although they were very common, but this was not the form that was employed by Edmund Spenser. Actually, when this poem was written and printed in 1579 almost, at that time eclogue was the name that was included in that very name that was printed in the form of book. So eclogue is the real option here, correct option. The next thing is whom did Spenser dedicate his The Shepherd's Calendar, right? Was it Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey? Surrey is a short form for Henry Howard, who was Earl of Surrey. Thomas Churchyard, we have discussed this literary figure in our previous lecture, and I have told you that he was very famous more because of his longevity than due to his any contribution to English literature. And Thomas White also is a very important figure. We have discussed in detail about him, and he was the one who brought sonnets into English literature. And Philip Sidney is the right answer here in this question. Philip Sidney was not only contemporary of Edmund Spenser, but also his close friend and his age fellow and many other things. And they contributed much of their poetry to each other. Question number 33 says, what literary form was exploited to the point of exhaustion by a Renaissance poet? You have to choose which of these forms was used so much by Renaissance poets that it lost its effectiveness, it lost its interest for the readers, it lost its appeal to people. Now, was it sonnet? Although this was used much by Renaissance poets, but there was a lot of experimentation, and that experiments brought some variety, and that variety definitely helped to maintain its interest for the readers. So this was not the form. And ballad, there was hardly any ballad written during the Renaissance period, and pastoral allegory was definitely the form that we'll choose here. This was the form that was used by the poets of Renaissance to the point of exhaustion. The point is that actually most of this form was written in imitation to Latin and Italian poets, so there was a lack of originality as far as this form was concerned. That is why it lost its interest for the readers. And dramatic monologue, as far as this literary form was concerned, again this was not there in that time. It developed a lot later. In his allegorical use of the poem The Shepherd's Calendar, Spenser was influenced most by 15th century Italian poet whose 10-line eclogues, I told you eclogues, we have discussed a short while ago. This was a literary form that was in the form of pastoral allegory. Here also it is there in this screen, and mostly its purpose was didactic. And now these eclogues, 10 Latin eclogues on moral and religious themes, were used as a school book throughout Europe. What was the name of that poet? Hint is that he was known in the literary world as Mantuan. This was literary name or a pen name, and you have to guess the real name of that poet, Italian poet. Giacomo di Lentini, Baptista Spagnoli, Ludovico Risotto, and Eugenio Montal. The correct answer is Baptista Spagnoli. All the remaining three poets are also definitely Italian poets, and they were very famous, but they have nothing to do with the pen name that was used by this poet. Now the next is in the Shepherd's Calendar. The shepherd Colin Clout stands for, as I've told you, that it was a pastoral allegory, and if there were allegorical elements, it means that the events and characters were actually the symbols of some things and somebody. So whose symbol was Colin Clout? There were actually some autobiographical elements there. So Spenser himself was Colin Clout, not Henry VII or Henry VIII or Chaucer. Spenser spent most of his later life from 1580 to 1599 in Ireland. This is the next piece of information for you people. And he was born in 1552-53, and till from that time up to 1580 he lived in England, but after that time he moved to Ireland, and even he married there in 1594. We will see it in the later questions, but this is an important piece of information as far as his personal life is concerned, that from 1580 to 1599, keep it in mind, this period 1580 to 1599 he lived in Ireland, not in Italy, not in Scotland, in France, in Ireland. Question 37. Which of the following poems in the form of beast fable? If you are following my lectures, you must know what it is. It is also called bestiary, and I have mentioned it in my lectures on Anglo-Norman period. Now it was written in rhymed couplets, featuring in his collection Complaints, is a spirited satire on contemporary abuses in economic, ecclesiastical, and court and governmental affairs. Now, as I told you in the beginning of my lecture, that you must not jump to any conclusion on the basis of merely the number of the questions included in my lectures, because as you can see that there are a lot of pieces of information. Form of beast fable. Which of these poems was in the form of beast fable? This is also a question. Which of these poems was in the form of rhymed couplet? And which of the poems the name might have been mentioned in the question, and you might be asked to name the collection. The name of collection was Complaints, and you can also be asked about what the subject matter of that poem. The poem that we will choose from these four was a spirited satire on contemporary abuses. It has been told here, but it can be asked what was the subject matter of the poem that we are going to discuss here. Now, all these four poems are by Edmund Spenser. Keep in mind, there is not any doubt about it, but they have a lot of different subject matters. For example, the Tears of Muses. In this poem, he actually laments the fact that there is a lack of original artworks. As you can see, the muses are shedding tears. Now, what is a muse in Greek and Roman mythology? You would know as a student of English literature that there were 9 goddesses, and they were the daughters of Zeus and Mnemosyne, who preside over the arts and sciences. So they are shedding tears on the lack of originality and lack of genuine works in English literature. And these two poems are mixtures of elegy and satire, but this subject matter, spirited satire on contemporary abuses in economical, ecclesiastical, court and governmental affairs, actually this is only discussed in Mother Hubbard's Tale. Now the next thing, published in 1595, Astrophel, a pastoral elegy upon the death of the most noble and valorous knight, Sir Philip Sidney, was dedicated to the most beautiful and virtuous lady, the Countess of Essex, Frances Walsingham. What was her relation to Philip Sidney? The relation of this lady with Philip Sidney. Put this question into some context. Astrophel and Stella was a collection of sonnets that was published by Philip Sidney, and actually Astrophel was a symbolic name for Sidney himself, and Stella was his lover, Sidney's beloved. So Edmund Spenser, being the friend of Philip Sidney, knew very well that Astrophel was Philip Sidney himself. That is why he wrote his elegy in 1595, Astrophel, on the death of Philip Sidney, who was his very close friend. Now that elegy was dedicated to this lady, Frances Walsingham. Who was this lady? Some information has been given. For example, Countess of Essex, right? Countess of Essex, the most beautiful and virtuous lady. Now you have to guess what was her relation to Sidney. Was she his widow, his lady whom he served? Because he was also a courtier, Philip Sidney, so it can be possible that it was his lady in the service of whom he had been, and his beloved, or no relation was there between them. The correct option is his widow. So Frances Walsingham was the wife of Philip Sidney. Edmund Spenser's Epithalamion is what? Ode, lyric, ballad, or idyll? It was written to his bride Elizabeth Boyle. Name of Spenser's wife was Elizabeth Boyle. On their wedding day in 1594. So there is a lot of information again in this question. You might be asked about Epithalamion. You might be asked what was the poem that was written in one of these forms, and it was written for his bride Elizabeth Boyle. And you can also be asked about when their marriage took place. It took place in 1594. Now here you have to guess which of these forms was used by Edmund Spenser for his poem Epithalamion. It was a rejoicing poem by Edmund Spenser. And now first three forms, ode, lyric, and ballad, are quite familiar to every student of English literature. But as far as idyll is concerned, it is actually a short description in the form of verse or even prose of a picturesque scene or incident, especially in a rural life or rustic life. So which of these forms was employed by Edmund Spenser? It was actually an ode, because it was addressed to his wife. Spenser married on June 11, 1594. We already knew before coming to this question that he married in 1594. It was given here. So now exact date is given on 11th of June 1594, after remaining a bachelor for a long time due to having been rejected by his unrequited lover named. Unrequited means unattained. Love named what? Stella. We have discussed that this was actually the name of Sidney's beloved, not Edmund Spenser's beloved. So one thing you must be sure of while choosing the correct option from these options is that Stella cannot be the right answer, because she was beloved of Sidney. Fanny Brown was beloved of John Keats, if you have read or heard about it. Rosalind or Elizabeth. Now these two are the options. From these two options we have to choose the right one, and the right one is option Charlie. Rosalind actually was the beloved of Edmund Spenser, and he wanted to marry her, but he could not. That is why he remained bachelor for such a long period of time. Having been born in 1552 to 52-53, he married at the age of 42. Next is Amoretti is a collection of sonnets written by Edmund Spenser. The cycle describes his wooing and resultant marriage to Elizabeth Boyle. And how many sonnets does the collection contain? Here the correct option is 89 sonnets were there in this collection of sonnets. So the one question that might arise in your minds, in the minds of my respected viewers, is that was this the lady Elizabeth Boyle for whom he remained in love and sad and melancholic? No, this was not the one. Actually, this was the lady with whom he fell in love while he was there in Ireland. But before that, Rosalind was there in England. Next thing is, first three books of Faerie Queene were published in 1590. Then these three were republished along with book 4 and 6. In which year? You have to tell it. Actually, there were in total 6 books that were published and that were written by Edmund Spenser, but the plan was to write more than 6. This we have to look in some other question. So wait for it. How many? What was the plan of Edmund Spenser of how many books did he plan? Now you have to tell when were the first 3 books republished. 1593, 4, 5 or 6. The correct option here is 1593. Spenser told his friend Gabriel Harvey about his model for the poem The Faerie Queene. What was the model for him? This is the question. The model for him was Dante's Divine Comedy, Horace's Ars Poetica, Aristotle's Orlando Furioso, or Ovid's Metamorphoses? That option from here, although they are all very important works, but this is the right option, option Charlie, Orlando Furioso. What literary form did Spenser adopt for his The Faerie Queene? Sonnet. Of course, it was not possible to arrange such a. We have already seen that there were 6 books that were written by Edmund Spenser, although he planned many more. But how is it possible that those 6 books contained only sonnet forms? Again, sonnet was not possible. Epic. It was definitely in the form of epic if it had many of them. Mock epic. It is said that Edmund Spenser did not have any sense of humor, so mock epic could not be possible. And again, it was not ode, it was not addressed to any one single person. So correct option here is epic. It was an unfinished epic. So as I have already mentioned that despite it was an unfinished epic, despite its greatness, The Faerie Queene is an unfinished work. Spenser's plan was to write how many books, of which he could write only 6? 12, 20, 24, 28. The right option is, you might be surprised to find, 24 books were planned by Edmund Spenser, of which he could write only 6. So it was only 1/4 of the epic that of which he had planned. Now read the statement carefully. The Faerie Queene is a collection of interlocked stories of chivalrous adventure in a world of marvels. You have to guess the name of the critic whose statement this is. The Faerie Queene is a collection of interlocked stories of chivalrous adventure in a world of marvels. Was it Matthew Arnold, C.S. Lewis, Thomas Stearns Eliot, or I.A. Richards? Here the correct option is C.S. Lewis. Right? Now you must have read that Edmund Spenser is generally called poet's poet. Who was the critic who used this term for Edmund Spenser? Clint Brooks, Charles Lamb, John Ruskin, or Samuel Johnson? Although all of them are quite good critics, except John Ruskin, who is not a literary critic, rather he is considered an art critic. To some extent he definitely wrote some literary criticism, but he is not known for it. So actually here the correct option is Charles Lamb. Right, Charles Lamb. The last question from literature portion is what was the best inspiration for Renaissance sonnet writers? White's sonnets, Petrarch's sonnets to Laura, Surrey's sonnets, none of these. So answer is very easy. Actually it was Petrarchan model that they usually followed. Now as far as vocabulary is concerned for your lectureship paper, we do not know from where the setter of the paper will get that vocabulary, but usually all over the world it is a common practice that usually SAT and GRE vocab is used mostly. So I have included GRE vocab. So the first word here in this portion is ALLAY. ALLAY means to make something, especially a feeling, less strong. Right, to decrease the strength of some feeling or some other thing. The first option is capable of being inferred. Of course, there is no relation between this and the meaning I have told you. To calm the violence or reduce the intensity or mitigate. It seems so. Let's move to the next. To obstruct, to hinder, to stop or to desist something. No, to chide or rebuke or a fault. To perform the first act or right. So you can see the option is very clear to us. It is to calm the violence or reduce the intensity of or mitigate. Now this word conduce is actually not as common as a word that has been derived from it, conducive. Conducive means favorable. So conduce means anything that helps to make something happen, to occur something. So let's move to the options. To bring about, to cause something happen. This is what I have told you, that this is the meanings, but maybe there is another option that is better than it. Any profit from service beyond the amount fixed as salary or wages. To punish, pretended or false apostle. the exertion of opposite force or effect. So again, the option is very clear to us. It is to bring about. Alpha option is correct option. Again, as was the question in number 2, veracious is not the word that is commonly used. It is a word that has been derived from the word veracity. Veracity means truth, honesty, integrity. So veracious is an adjective it is used for a person or any story speaking or representing the truth. So that cannot be broken or violated. A journey, habitually disposed to speak the truth, easily affected by outside operations or influences, the act of turning or directing inward physically or mentally. This is something of introversion. So it was actually something related about the truth, habitually disposed to speak the truth. One is who is in habit of speaking the truth is called veracious. So this is the correct option, Charlie option. The next word is conjugal. It is used for marriage. Anything relating to marriage or relationship between married couple, right? A conjugal loyalty, conjugal affairs, for example. So the first option is cheerful. Then pertaining to marriage, marital rights, married persons, of course this is option. Again, next is to confuse the perception or judgment of or one especially cared for and favored by another, usually older person. So again, the answer is very clear, beat option, pertaining to marriage or marital rights. So next is introversion. If you come to the previous slide, this was the act of turning or directing inward physically or mentally. I told you this is something about introversion. So introvert is a person who actually remains lost in himself, and he is not comfortable while mixing in his friends, going outside, enjoying himself in the outer world. He remains in the inner world. So adapted for grasping or holding, the act of turning or directing inward physically or mentally. This is exactly the option. I don't think there is any doubt. You can read the other options, and if you have any doubt about the option that I have chosen, beat option, then you can contact me. Execration. Now this is an extremely uncommon word, execration, very rare word. It is not usually used. There are some derivative words like execrable, for example. This execration actually means the action or an act of pronouncing a curse upon a person or even that person who is cursed is called execration. So pertaining to horses or horsemanship, any small portion or a meager allowance, clinging or sticking fast to indulge in profane. Also profane means sacrilegious, in which there is something blasphemous. Now next thing is accursed thing. So this is what I have told you, that option E is correct. The act of cursing something or even the person or thing that has been cursed. Paroxysm. Paroxysm is actually a violent attack or outburst or fit of some emotion like anger or enthusiasm or anything, activity, a fit of convulsion, right? A natural disturbance as an earthquake, for example, in earth. So in person or thing, there is some extreme disturbance. That disturbance is called paroxysm. So if in that disturbance, such disturbance comes in a human being, he might be very angry, very happy, or any sort of emotion can be intensified. So the first is to intensify. But to intensify, actually this paroxysm is a noun. So to intensify is a verb. So that cannot be synonym for paroxysm. A sudden outburst of any kind of activity. Now this is something that seems to be relevant. An officer of an insurance company who calculates and states the risks and premiums. No, because such person is usually called actuary, right? This is the word for such person. A council or assembly that deliberates or in secret upon the affairs of government or edict. So again, very easy. The option is a sudden outburst, beat option. The next is sentence completion questions are there. As he became angrier, his insulting remarks became more. The first option is vitriolic, critical, extremely critical, full of criticism, fallacious, Full of fallacy means wrong. Condone means to accept something, by means of silence. If something wrong is being done or happening in front of you and you do not say something, it means you are condoning it. Skeptical means doubtful, and homogeneous means having the same composition in a mixture of something. So vitriolic, again you can see it is a right option. Full of criticism, critical. So the sentences, as he became angrier, his insulting remarks became more and more vitriolic, critical, full of criticism. Now, I admire his style of writing. What kind of style of writing? He comes directly to the point. Not coming to the point, not beating about the bush, and coming straight to the point. Very pithy style, very short, concise, brief, and to the point style. Actually, there is a name for it, and that name is terse. Right, the other options are exemplary, from example. Indolent is lazy, lethargic, sluggish. Pragmatic means it can have different connotations. For example, if a person is pragmatic, he usually acts with the consequences in mind. Now, legacy is inheritance. Because defeat was sure, the general was willing to what? The first option says rebuff. It means reject something. Willing to reject. Reject what? It is a transitive verb. It needs an object, so this cannot be the option. Stoic means a person who remains happy even in the face of difficulties. Again, it is an adjective, so it cannot be the option here. Capitulate means cease to resist. Stop resisting. So this seems to be the very accurate option. Seem to resist, stop resisting, for example. Because defeat was sure, the general knew that he was going to lose the battle, so he was willing to capitulate. He was willing to stop the resistance and surrender. So this is the right option. Actually, infamous is notorious, somebody who does not have a good reputation, and simulated means imitated. So the correct option here is capitulate. The reviewers praised what? The new restaurant's what? A selection of dishes which ranged from oriental stir fries to French ragouts and stews. First option says oscillation. Oscillation means move to and fro, motion from one place to other place A to place B. Nothing to do here in this sentence. Restaurants, to and fro, motion selection, no, not possible. Eclectic selection. Eclectic means collective, wide ranging. So this seems to be a very good option. Let's say if there is any better option. Profound, deep. It is usually used for feelings, knowledge, etc. The next is impervious. Impervious is anything that does not let the flow of water through it. Any membrane, any layer that does not let the flow of water through it. The glottis is misshapen, disfigured something that has been distorted to such an extent that it seems very ugly and very funny. So the only right option here is eclectic, right? Collective and wide-ranging approach. Now this is a bonus question that every student of literature must answer. If this question is not answered by any student, then he must question his knowledge. Wordsworth defined poetry as what? Overflow of powerful feelings. I will not tell the answer to this question. You have to tell the answer in comment section, right? The next lecture on literature is going to be on Sir Philip Sidney and his contemporary literature and contemporary writers. If there is any question, confusion, again there is an open invitation. You can ask me on Facebook, or I have told you link here. This is my Facebook ID, and this again comment section is also available for you. But remember that you have to answer the last question that I have left unanswered here. Also keep in mind. So till the next lecture, goodbye, take care.